Welcome to our third Take a Bite Lunchtime webinar. I'm Jordan Jankus of ARC of Westchester, and my mission is to help people with cognitive disabilities learn about the possibilities of personal technology and how it can help them with their daily lives. We've had presenters from Toby, Dynavox, and CaptiVoice in our previous webinars, and today we'll be featuring a presentation from Identifor. Before we begin, I just want to let you know that the microphones of the webinar attendees are muted, but that doesn't mean that we don't want your participation. At any time, please go to the chat section of your go-to control panel and type in the question or comment. I want to thank all the folks at the Coleman Institute for Cognitive Disabilities for their support that makes these webinars and our other outreach efforts possible. They have issued a declaration on the rights of people with cognitive disabilities to technology and information access, and they are looking for the support of individuals and organizations for this declaration. If you haven't yet signed their declaration, please go to their website that's right below and show your support. Be sure to mention that you heard about it from ARC of Westchester. We also ask that you take a moment after this webinar to visit our website that has blogs and resources about personal technology. We recently held a conference on tech supports for cognition and learning at Mercy College, and many of the presentations from that conference are available on the site. Now I'm going to welcome our presenter today, Steve Keisman of Identifor, an organization that has developed some amazing products to help explore life opportunities for people on the autism spectrum.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Jordan and the ARC of Westchester for inviting me today. And of course, thank you all for joining today's webinar. My hope is, hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll have a better understanding of the current landscape of neurodiverse employment, and you'll understand at least the way that at least one company is using the latest technology in attempting to shift the paradigm. Let me begin by saying that oftentimes I have to do an elevator pitch, and that really means I have 40 seconds exactly, the time that it takes me to ride up in an elevator, to go over a couple of different areas that Identifor touches upon. And the whole idea of a elevator pitch is for me to be able to organize a second meeting with somebody. So I have a limited amount of time to talk about certain areas that Identifor is all about. And the two areas that I want to speak about today mostly we'll talk about transition and neurodiverse employment and how they impact people with autism and other intellectual disabilities. And the main focus today that I'd like to just point out that is, if you remember nothing else, just remember that between 500,000 and 1 million autistic children will turn the age of 21 in the next decade. 84 to 91% of them will be unemployed or underemployed. And Identifor is trying to transform the lost lives into fulfilling ones. And the reason I'm telling you this is just the number of people with autism that are expected to turn the age of 21. Can you imagine when we add all of the other people with intellectual and other disabilities as well? And as many of you probably know, that students with autism often leave school completely unprepared for the real world. And oftentimes I hear stories when I go around the country talking about Identifor, and when I talk about transition and neurodiverse employment, I hear heart-wrenching stories about what happens when that school bus stops coming. Hear about kids that sit all day on the couch and they're just doing all kinds of things in an isolated way. And it really becomes even a bigger problem when parents are no longer around to supervise. As you may know, the law, the IDEA law that talks about all things having to do with people with disabilities was changed in 2004. And one of the ways that they felt it was important, the reason that they felt it was important to change the law was to make sure that kids did not end up on a couch at the end of their high school experience, but it was supposed to be a way that a bridge can be built to help that child move on and transition to the real world once they graduate from high school. And it's not just that it's something that's put into every student's IEP, but it's the law, and it really must be followed. One of the questions that comes up all the time is, how do we measure a transition plan success? Is it how many relationships a person has when they graduate? Do they love their life? Can they live independently? What are the things that really make a transition plan successful is the overarching question that we need to ask ourselves. But in every meeting that I've ever been in that discussed this topic, what I could tell you is that every single time meaningful employment is always number one or number two on that list. So you see here that I have meaningful employment highlighted because we're not talking about just any kind of employment, but we're talking about something that's really a basic human right for all people. And one of the things I talk about quite often is that the greatest weakness, in my opinion, of IDEA is that there is no guarantee of a job once somebody turns the age of 21. And all too often, people were taught skills that aren't going to be the ones they're going to need when they're no longer in school. I also talk about how there's honor in all work, but what if those 5 F's just aren't enough? And when I talk about the 5 F's, I'm talking about filing, folding, food, flowers, and filth. And the reason I point out these occupations or these jobs is because oftentimes, all too often I should say, people with intellectual disabilities are relegated to these jobs, whether they could do more or not. And it's about time that we start looking at making our young adults into value propositions for companies, not mascots. And all too often, the reason that they're being hired is because they're just doing something to help a company polish their image, or for other reasons, like perhaps somebody from a company knows one of their employees, or somebody that they know has one of these disabilities and wants to bring them on just to be more of a mascot than a value proposition. Once again, we talk about how all people have some kind of value to a company because they have some kind of skills and ability that can really be a value proposition. We talk about how make work jobs are disrespectful because they're really not taking the person into consideration. One thing I also want to mention is that although things do look bleak at times, the encouraging news is that of all of the disabilities, people with autism are the most in demand for employment, of all kinds of employment. One of the things that's helping open up more doors for people with autism is that there are new federal laws that you may have heard of. One of them is often referred to as the 7% solution, that is really changing things from a top-down way. All companies that have 100 or more employees that have any kind of contract work that they're proposing to do with the federal government must now have 7% of that workforce must have some type of disability. Many companies now are starting to look in a different direction. In the past, it was if that person would be able to fit into all aspects of a company, where now what we're looking at is who is the best talent for a company, who is the best worker, and a job can be carved out based on what those skills, abilities, and interests that that person has. And what companies are starting to do slowly is that they're starting to really look at creating inclusive cultures to help people with all different types of disabilities fit in best. And this quote was by a young man who has Asperger's, and he was talking about how he'll never fit in to the traditional type of employment, even though his skills are quite high. Some companies now are also looking at things from a different perspective. They're saying that because work is so meaningful in the life of all people, that now we're looking at finding a way that we can have people with all types of disabilities provide value to a company because of the importance of work in all people's lives. So I represent a company called Identifor. I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but I'm glad you're here today so I can tell you more. And I'm going to open it up a little bit later to questions and answers, and you can type those so that I can answer them back, or however I can get you that information. What we do at Identifor is we look at 3 different ways of helping to change things so that people with autism and other intellectual disabilities are able to transition to real life in a way that's never been done before. And the first thing that we look at is career direction. So I want to tell you a little bit about career direction first, but I always forget to mention that everything I'm going to talk about is free. There's no charge for people to use our platform. Anyhow, the biggest transition obstacle that we find for people with all intellectual disabilities is career direction. And the reason is that pen and paper tests, whether they're Scantrons or whatever kind of pen and paper test a person is asked to take, oftentimes it's a disaster. And people just are not able to really give the kind of information necessary to help predict the future for them because of the problem that they have in filling out those tests. Also, there are a bunch of other challenges as well. And some of those other challenges are that people with intellectual disabilities have sheltered existence, limited experiences. A lot of times they don't communicate in a traditional way or communicate much at all verbally, so it's really hard to know what interests they have and what they're able to do. And because they have a different way of, because their existence has been different than a non-neurotypical, than a neurotypical child, it's often problematic to try to capture the information that we do for people who are neurotypical as well. So what we do is we develop the world's first technology that allows us to give a career assessment tool for people with intellectual disabilities that's game-based. So instead of those Scantrons and other types of information, we're now able to, we build something that allows people to get that same information that we got before, or even better, we believe, by having them play dozens of different games. So we also believe that in the games that we develop, we believe that the 3 areas that we wanted to bake in this product is something that looks at executive function, multiple intelligence, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Holland Career Code, often called the RIASEC code. So we look at these 3 dimensions, we bake them into our product, and all the user knows, all the individual knows, is that they're playing fun and engaging games, but in the background, all of these three areas are being assessed in a granular way. We feel that, we've been following all of the research, and it's been pointing more and more lately and validated more and more lately that the most important aspect for predicting how well somebody will be able to do in their workforce is their executive function. And it's much more important than their IQ, their classification, or other things. This is George McCloskey. He's one of the leading voices in executive function, and he's on our team and helped create our platform. We also look at the various different kinds of ways that a person is intelligent. And what I mean by that is somebody may be an outdoor person, and no matter how good their scores and their abilities and they're able to do different kinds of mathematical skills, if you put them in a cubicle all day and they're an outdoors person, obviously they're not going to do their best. So the second dimension in Identifor's career tool is measuring the user's multiple intelligence. And as Howard Gardner, who came up with the theory, has said, it's not how smart you are, but how you are smart. The third area is the John Holland career codes. And we look at this as well to see where a person, where their code fits into which occupations. And the RIASEC code is interesting because not only gives us a code that can be very helpful for us to figure out what somebody is good at, but we're also able, using large employment sites, to figure out where a person might do best based on that code. So whether it's working in a theater, as an example, or working in different types of organizations, government organizations, the court system, for instance. Here is an example of how different people with different codes can fit into a healthcare setting. So as individuals play these games, these dozens of games, a dashboard is generated. And the dashboard is able to use different filters that we have to get even a more accurate look at that person against people in their own group to see where they fit in and where their strengths are. So you could sort this by age group, gender, clinical diagnosis, etc. And from playing these different games, we're able to look at different types of multiple intelligences and executive functions, and we're able to drill down. And if you look at the lower right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see that you're able to drill down and see over time which of those areas, each of those areas a person is doing, whether they're improving, staying the same, or falling off. Once we're able to take a look at this, we're also able to see which careers make sense for that individual. And what we have are these careers that are listed at the bottom of the dashboard that if you double-click the hyperlink, it takes you to the ONET website. And ONET, for the people who are not familiar with it, is a website that was developed and is maintained by the Office of Department of Labor, Office of Labor Statistics. And what they do is, for over 1,000 job titles, they break them down into real detail. So we're able to see exactly the kinds of tasks that a person with that job title will be required to do. What tools will they have to know how to use? What are the different types of areas that are most important for somebody in one of those career areas? ONET is a wonderful resource, and it includes videos and other kinds of details that could be helpful for any type of transition program, university program, or a clinician who's working with somebody to give them specific areas to help get them ready for when they leave the program. One of the things that we also are able to do with Identifor is based on that person's executive functions, we're able to see specific, where we add for you, we give you some ideas in helping you have those students reach those goals. So first of all, the goals now can be specific in the IEP, where in transition oftentimes there are no real goals. It's more like Jell-O on a plate. But here we're able to put specific goals and objectives, specific activities. We recommend different kinds of apps and tools and other kinds of things for the person to achieve those areas. And then using backward design, once it's in the IEP, we then figure out as a team how we can get the person to accomplish each one of those. Something else that we have on our site is a 360-degree assessment. And the way that we do that is we have two surveys. One of them is George McCloskey's Executive Function Survey that I want to talk to you about first. And what that does is it allows all of the people who are working with that youngster or that young adult to be able to have a voice and to be able to give specific information about how they see that person. So there are dozens of questions that are asked, and it's all that information is then aggregated and emailed to the team leader or the child study team leader, so that additional information can be given to those people to see where there is divergence, not similarity, because we're looking to see perhaps one person who works with that child sees the person differently and is then able to say, hey, I can't believe everybody else didn't see this, but this is what I do. Maybe that could be helpful to you folks. So what this really does is it's a tool that's on our website, Identifor.com, that allows each of the stakeholders who's working with that young person and that young person themselves, if they're able to be able to give some information to help the rest of the team. The second survey that we have, or the second tool that we have built into this 360-degree assessment, is a tool that we developed with Virginia Commonwealth University, and we did this for Autism Speaks, who supports us, by the way. And it's a similar kind of assessment tool as the McCloskey Executive Function Survey, because again, there are these different areas of functional ability of a student that each of the people who work with that student is able to send their assessment, and it is then once again aggregated and given to the team leader so that they can use that information in a meeting when they work with that student or that young adult. Second thing that we do is that we work with meaningful employment using Identifor. And the way that we do that is use Identifor as in the career assessment of a person, or I should say in the discovery process, so that instead of going to a company and saying to a company, yes, this person is a really nice person, they're terrific, they don't melt down as much as they used to, they'll never miss a day's work, they don't have a bad bone in their body. Now we're able to say, take a look at the dashboard and see that this person has these skills, abilities, and interests. How can they provide value to your company? Instead of saying, what job can you throw them in? Now we're saying, where can they prove valuable to your company? And we're working with different agencies now and with different employers as well to help them shape this in a way that makes sense to help get people jobs who are either on the spectrum or have other intellectual disabilities. Something else that I want to talk about has to do with 24-hour, 7-day-a-week support. And No matter how good the job that you find for a person is, no matter how great that match might be, at the end of the day, if a person is unable to figure out when they have to come back from a break or to do certain kinds of things, how to get to a place on time, how to be reminded of certain kinds of medication that they must take and other kinds of things, no matter how great that job match is, they're probably not going to keep the job. So we decided that not only do we want to give career direction, and not only do we want to help that person get a job, but we also felt it was imperative to figure out a way that we can support them on the job, in the community, and in real life as well. I know it's counterintuitive for many, but the need for supporting people with different disabilities increases, not decreases, once they age out of school. And the way that we were able to put together this next aspect that I want to tell you about is that we worked for over a year and a half with different institutions, employment centers, and other places around the country. We sent around a bunch of our interns to sit down with the actual clients themselves, to sit down with the students in universities themselves, and to ask them, where do you have the greatest trouble and need the most support during the day? We also then sat down with the clinicians that work with them, with the university professors, with the people in housing, with the families of these folks, and we asked them the same question. And we aggregated and put together all that information into a huge Google Doc, and then we brought it to our team that put together our live avatar that I want to tell you about in a minute. Right now, I want to point out also that we can't always say right now is that we have anecdotal evidence to support everything that I'm telling you here right now, but I can't say it's the gold standard yet. But currently, there are clinical trials that are going on at Dartmouth University. Florida International University is doing a study with 2 campuses of the Dan Marino Foundation, with the Miami-Dade and Broward County Department of Special Education. Pace University in New York is doing a small study, smaller study than the other 2. So we're now testing all of this information to make sure that it's something that is that we're able to then promote as the gold standard in career assessment and support for people with intellectual disabilities. We're also partnering with different groups like Picasso Einstein and other organizations as well. And I want to tell you a little bit about how this companion works. So the first part, the career assessment tool, a person plays games either on their phone, on a computer, or on a tablet. All of that information is saved into a cloud as long as they sign into an account that was created for them. All that information is saved. We're then able to get a blueprint for them based on the different games and how they play them. The second part that I'm telling you about now is the support for the person on the job. And unfortunately, because of the process of us doing this now, I can't show it to you live and in person, but you could always call me and I could do that another time if you would like to know more about it. But what we have is this is Abby on our, that is resident on a person's phone, whether it's an Android or an Apple iPhone. And what she does is through real conversation and natural type of language, meaning you could just speak to her in regular tone, she's able to answer well over 1,000, I believe close to 2,000 questions that someone might have during the day that they might want some kind of answer for. She's able to answer those kinds of questions. How to make some kind of food, for instance. She'll answer how to introduce yourself, how to ask somebody out on a date, what is aggressive behavior, when is my next break, what is anxiety and what can I do for it, what does TGIF mean, all different kinds of things like that. On the job, like I haven't gotten paid in 2 weeks, what should I do? Or for safety kinds of things, there's somebody downstairs ringing the bell, I don't know who they are, should I let them in? And she responds to these questions in a very natural way because she's a live avatar, meaning that it's a real person, not a cartoon or an icon. So for simple kinds of needs, for reminders and things like that, that could all be done on this app. And that's also part of the Identifor free platform. So all of this is for free as well. It's based on advanced artificial intelligence technology, and we do it in a very, very creative kind of way that's never been done before. And the way that she works, Abby, is that it's similar to a video chat where you just speak to her in a very natural way. And then there are these different modules that helps that person during the day. And the more a person uses them, the better Abby gets to know them and becomes more intuitive. So, for instance, where it says money in the middle, you'll see that's the second on the left column, and that's a virtual wallet. Instead of trying endlessly to teach somebody how to which denominations to pay for something, the way that this works is that you populate this with the denomination and the amount of money in your wallet, the coins that you have, and then when you go to a restaurant, it'll tell you how much to split the check and which denominations to pay with. Where the weather, where we have our weather module, what we're able to do in that is not only tell the person the weather and the forecast, but also using some icons, we tell them how to dress for the weather, whether to bring an umbrella or what to do. We also have routines. We have a medication compliance aspect to this. In our navigation, not only do we have walking, public transportation, and driving, we also have an Uber interface as well, because so many of our kids and young adults use Uber. We decided to put that in too. The same games that you could play on our website have also been adapted so that they can also be played on the phone as well. This aspect of Identifor is an international award winner for artificial intelligence because it was the world's first human avatar. We used a very different type of approach that is nuanced in a way of determining somebody's intent. And because it's conversational rather than static, it's also something that's very different than anything that's been available until now. So before I take some questions, I just want to go over a few key points here, and that is that if we don't do something soon, then this autism cliff that people are talking about is going to come to fruition, meaning that there really is a national crisis that's going on about so many of our kids that are graduating with no real future, no meaningful employment, and nothing for them to do except to graduate to the couch. Also talked about meaningful employment being a right not just for people without disabilities, but for all people. The traditional assessment tools that we now have are not usable for most of our students for many different reasons. The direction that somebody is pointed in is only half the job. We really need to not just find them something that they're going to be good at and a place that makes sense for them to work at, but also we have to support them on the job. And that was the reason we developed the Identifor companion that I just spoke about. So what Identifor does is it not only improves the job match, but it also supports the user in all different ways and in all different places. And as Jordan pointed out before, and I always forget to reinforce, it's free. Everything that I'm talking about now is free. If a school just wants to use that assessment tool or both assessment tools, that's fine with us. Use those, and hopefully they'll prove useful for the people that you're working with. If you want career assessment to help give some kind of discovery process, that extra boost with a very detailed dashboard, you could just use the games and do that piece. And also, you could just use that support piece with Abby, our live avatar.
One thing that drives me crazy is that the expectation for employment, at least in New York State, is a very low bar. You know, when they count somebody as employed, it's certainly not a 40-hour-a-week job.
Right.
Does this help people plan the rest of their life? Because there's not an awful lot of folks that have full 40-hour-a-week jobs. And how do you fill the rest of your time during the week? When you're talking about those apps, the coach, the companion, the calendar, is that available like in the Apple Store or in the Google Play Store for download?
Yep, they both are available. If you search for in either store for Identifor, you'll find the app.
Okay. And a lot of the things that you're talking about, I can see a need for it not just in folks with that are on the spectrum, but so many other people with intellectual disabilities. And so is the product, as far as the assessment piece of the product, is that skewed more for folks on the spectrum, or can anybody take those, do the games, do the evaluations?
That's a great question. So it was designed, the founders of the company, Hung Do and Laurie Rickles, have a son on the spectrum. And for their son, who's becoming of transition age, they wanted to find out the best way that they could help him in the future. So they developed this product, but it's not just for people with autism. It was opened up to people with all different types of intellectual disabilities, and that's the reason why we're able to filter the person's disability, their gender, their age, their communication abilities, etc., so that you can get a more accurate assessment of that person. But what I also want to say is that even though we designed it for the transition age of 14 to 21, anybody who could play these games, whether it's a neurotypical person, whether it's someone who's 8 years old, and I've had parents tell me that they've had 6 and 7 year old children of theirs playing, you're able to get the same information that anybody else would.
Okay, so the process of doing this, somebody uses the games, but also then does the McCloskey evaluation. Do they do all those things, or they just concentrate on the games? How exactly does it work?
And I'm sorry, John, and that's the thing that makes this a very unique platform, is that you could pick and choose what works best for you. So I think that the main aspect that we're looking for here is to find as close to competitive employment or supportive employment full-time as possible, if that makes sense for somebody. However, we believe that the work piece is so important in the lives, in giving a meaningful life to somebody when they graduate from school, so that if the best that they can find or the best that they're capable of doing is a part-time job, well, perhaps we could start with that. So what this does will support the person in the community, as well as find a career that makes sense for them.
If you're at, let's say, like I'm from Markup, Westchester, and if I wanted to play around with this more, is there also support where we could contact somebody and try and walk us through the whole steps of the project?
Absolutely. So if somebody wants to learn more about the product, and if they want to know how they can use it, or would like me to come out and do a demo or something of that nature, they can reach me at the email address in the upper left of the screen right now. It's steve.keisman@identifor.com. If after playing the games there's any kind of technical issues or any kind of question that you need additional information about, you just go, and it's right on everything is as user-friendly as possible. You go to support@identifor.com. You'll see it right on our website, and you'll get an answer in a short amount of time to the questions that you may have. I also want to point out that we're redoing our website, and the new version will be, because we are a new company, but the updated version of our website will be available in mid-July.
When it comes to helping somebody use the system. It's very simple with the games and all that. Have you done any testing with folks that are like direct support professionals that can assist people? Because I know on my end, sometimes when I'm trying to get folks to use smartphones and tablets, I find out that a lot of the direct support professionals aren't that tech savvy themselves.
Well, what we have is sometimes I go out and I'll do training with them to help them understand what needs to be done. But to be quite frank with you, the way that Identifor was designed was to make it as user-friendly as possible for all users. So we haven't really run into many problems of people figuring out how to use and how to apply the kinds of the kinds of details that Identifor offers.
I love the idea of a meaningful job too, because this kind of like doesn't say that everybody should be a greeter at Walmart. You know,
Exactly.
there's more meaningful employment out there. Absolutely.
Exactly right.
Yeah. And could you just, I'm not personally familiar with it, maybe this is a dumb question, but Picasso Einstein, that you said they partner, what is Picasso Einstein?
So they're one of the organizations that we partnered with, and I suggest everybody go to PicassoEinstein.org. Also look at the conference that they support called Trailblazing 2017. That'll be held at the end of September. And it's an organization that works very hard in a very different kind of way at getting people jobs. People who have autism and other intellectual disabilities. A lot of what they do is entrepreneurship. At this conference that I just mentioned to you, they'll even have representatives from some of the biggest companies that hire people on the spectrum doing the actual interviews at the conference. Google will be there, SAP will be there, other companies. So they look at the best way to find employment for all disabilities, whether it's a one job for one person kind of arrangement, or if it's something in interfacing with a large company as well. And they're now using Identifor to help the discovery process in finding the careers and helping to support the people in their program. But they're one of the leaders in neurodiverse employment training for people with intellectual disabilities.
It's such an important point you mentioned before when somebody goes in, say like a job developer, and they go into a company, and the typical thing is, what jobs do you have available? And it isn't what we can do to complement your workforce, or, you know, and the mascot idea is absolutely incredible, because a lot of people use that, where it's just sort of like, look at the one disabled person that we have in our organization, pat them on the head.
Exactly. And what's interesting along that line also is that the whole emphasis of Autism Speaks and just autism in general has changed. Originally, they started with looking at what was the cause of autism, then the cure for autism, then became the big push was in early diagnoses, but less than 1% of all of the resources is spent on people 21 and over. And now employment has become the big emphasis in the whole area of autism. And that's the reason that we feel that we're really on the cutting edge of things, because this is needed so badly to get into the hands of not just families of people who are affected, but also to the employer on the other side as well.
Right. And especially coming from a school system where you have a lot of deep supports, one-to-one aids and all of that, and you come into the adult system and they just doesn't exist anywhere.
Exactly.
It's, you're falling off a cliff without some kind of additional work.
And also, everybody talks about person-centered planning and transition, and everybody talks about we have to build on strengths and things like that. But in actuality, that really doesn't happen. It's just talked about. And part of the reason is that there's no way to get a real clear assessment of that person. Without that assessment, what's the starting point? So we're not a deficiency-based product. We're really a strength-based product but we're not theoretical either. We really understand that autism is forever, and we really have a means here of getting somebody's profile in a way that makes sense in finding them a job or helping them find a job.
Yeah. And you hadn't mentioned it before, but I believe that you're a parent of a individual with some special needs.
I have three children, and two of them have special needs. Two of my daughters have special needs. I have a 20-and-a-half-year-old daughter who has microcephaly before it became the disability du jour, and impacted, and people with that disability are impacted in a similar way to people with autism. Depending on the shape of the head, they're impacted in different ways, and she's very significantly impacted. And one of the reasons that I work for the company now is because of the information that my wife and I were able to find out about Melanie that we had no idea about. So, again, that's just one anecdotal story, but it's quite a story in our own lives.
Right. And it really speaks to your involvement in this, because I think when a parent is involved, they bring something special to it. I'm a parent, and it's a very unique perspective that you have. You never look at your child as a deficit. You look at it for whatever strength there is. My adult daughter, her strength is that she loves to ask people, "Are you happy?" I don't know where you would put that on the evaluation thing, but that's a blessing to an awful lot of people just to be asked that question, "Are you happy?" So God bless you for your work. You're doing absolutely incredible activities. I'm definitely going to reach out to you later after this webinar and talk about getting you into ARC of Westchester to talk to some of our folks in employment and some of the parent groups. So I don't have any other questions coming up on the chat window. Everybody's time is precious, so I'm not going to belabor this, but I'm sure Steve has offered to answer any questions. His email is up there. Thank you all for joining us. Steve, I can't thank you enough. You did a great presentation. I hope you have a great day.